There is a bone in a landfill under your nearest city, and in 10 million years, it will still be there. It belonged to a chicken that lived 7 weeks. No bird on Earth is more abundant. Remove us tonight, and that bone becomes the clearest fossil of our entire age. So who moves into the seat we leave empty? Start with the landfill, because that is where the evidence is. A landfill is not a compost heap. Once a load of rubbish is buried under the next load, and that one under the one after it, the oxygen runs out. Below a certain depth, there is no air. There is almost no water moving through, and there is very little left for bacteria to breathe with. Carries Bennett and her colleagues at Leicester, writing in 2018, described what happens down there about as plainly as a scientific paper ever describes anything. Buried material does not so much degrade as mummify. Newspapers come out of old landfills still readable. Lettuce comes out still looking like lettuce. And bone, which is already more than half mineral before it goes into the ground, comes out as bone. So picture the one we started with. A chicken leg bone, about the length of your index finger, lying in the dark under a city, inside a sealed layer of clay and plastic and old dinner. Now consider how many of them are down there with it. In 2016, the standing population of chickens on this planet was 22.7 billion birds. That is roughly 3 chickens alive at this moment, for every human being alive at this moment. In that same year, 65.8 billion of them were eaten. 65.8 billion in a year works out at about 2,000 birds a second. 2,000 this second. 2,000 the second after that. All day, every day, without a pause, all year. Almost none of those skeletons go anywhere interesting. They go into the ground under the anaerobic seal, in the one environment on this planet that is specifically good at keeping things. Here is what makes the bone strange rather than merely numerous. It is not the bone of a wild animal. It is not really the bone of the bird it came from either. Compare a modern meat chicken with a red jungle fowl, which is its wild ancestor at exactly the same age, and the limb bone has tripled in width and doubled in length. That is the difference between a pencil and a broom handle, grown in the same number of days. The whole animal has changed shape to match. Body mass has risen by as much as 5-fold since the middle of the 20th century, and the growth rate is now 3 times that of the jungle fowl. Even before that, from the late medieval period onward, the bird had already at least doubled in size. And it does all of that in 5 to 7 weeks. 5 to 7 weeks is younger than a kitten is when it leaves its mother. A red jungle fowl lives about 3 years in the wild and can reach 11 in captivity. The animal in the landfill got 7 weeks, and in those 7 weeks it grew a skeleton in a shape that no wild bird has ever had, and that natural selection never once produced in 150 million years of birds. You have almost certainly eaten one this month. There is a reasonable chance you ate one this week. Which brings us to the uncomfortable part of the arithmetic. If a geologist 10 million years from now cuts into the layer we are laying down right now, this is the vertebrate they meet first. Not a whale, not a tiger. Not us. The most complete animal record of the human age is a record of an animal we made. So who is left outside the landfill? Everyone has a version of the answer, and the common version is not stupid. Small, eats anything, breeds quickly. Lives everywhere. That list comes from somewhere real. It is roughly what happened after the asteroid. The animals that walked out of the end of the Cretaceous were small, unfussy, fast-breeding, and widely spread. And the ones that did not walk out were mostly the opposite. It is also, right now, a fair description of the world we have already built. Take the total mass of all mammal flesh on this planet and sort it. Wild mammals, all of them, every elephant and whale and deer and mouse, come to about 7/1000ths of a gigaton of carbon. Human beings come to about 6/100ths. Livestock come to about 1/10. Put plainly, for every kilogram of wild mammal left alive, there are roughly 14 kilograms of livestock. Wild mammal biomass is estimated to have fallen by around 80% across the rise of human civilization. And in 2015, Gerardo Ceballos and his colleagues put the modern vertebrate extinction rate at about 100 times the background rate, using a baseline deliberately set twice as high as the standard one, so that the comparison would be hard to argue with. So the list looks settled. Small, hungry, fertile, everywhere. Apply it. Pick a winner, go home. There is a problem with the list. In 2023, Pedro Monares, Noel Heim, and Jonathan Payne went through the marine fossil record and asked which traits actually predict extinction. The important thing they did was separate the ordinary intervals from the mass extinctions and score them apart. In ordinary intervals, the list works. Geographic range turns out to be the single strongest predictor of survival there is. If a species lives in one place, it dies. If it lives everywhere, it tends not to. Body size matters as well, though more weakly. During the mass extinctions themselves, that geographic range signal is reduced in every class they examined, and in some classes it disappears completely. And body size does something worse than disappear. It varies in strength and in direction between groups. In some groups, being large kills you. In others, it does not, or it helps. Read that slowly, because it is the hinge this whole investigation turns on. The rules that decide who survives an ordinary century are not the rules that decide who survives a catastrophe. The event does not simply kill things. It changes what killing means. There is a second warning in the record, and it comes from a warming rather than an impact. 56 million years ago, the planet ran a large and fast carbon release of its own. In 2017, Abigail D'Ambrosia and her colleagues tracked what that did to the mammals living through it. The earliest horse, an animal already only the size of a small dog, lost at least 30% of its body size across the first 130,000 years of the warming. It shrank to roughly the size of a house cat. Then, as the warming eased, it took back 76% of what it had lost. Hold on to that, because it says something the trait list does not. Body size is not a fixed property of a lineage. It is a dial, and the climate turns it, which is worth applying to the pig, since the pig is a serious candidate, and people rarely take it seriously. It is large, omnivorous, intelligent, present on every continent we have carried it to, and it goes feral faster and more completely than almost any other domestic animal. It does not need us. But large is the one trait on the list the record treats inconsistently, and in a warming world it is the trait that gets trimmed first. And that is the verdict of this chapter. We are trying to forecast the survivors of a mass extinction using the rule book of ordinary times. The event rewrites the rule book while it is running, and it does not publish the new one. Most people watching this are not subscribed. If a chicken bone outlasting a cathedral is your kind of question, that is easily fixed. Now, back to the bone, and to the one number standing between it and any successor at all. Assume the worst has already happened, and assume something survived it. Something always does. How long before the world looks full again? In the year 2000, James Kirkner and Anne Weil put that question to the fossil record directly. They took the database of marine fossil genera assembled by Jack Sepkoski, which covers the last 530 million years, and they compared the rate at which lineages disappeared against the rate at which new ones appeared. They found a lag of about 10 million years. 10 million years is 50 times longer than our species has existed. Anatomically modern humans have been here for something on the order of 200,000 or 300,000 years. The recovery interval is a unit of time with no human meaning at all. Every language, every city, every war, every religion The whole span from the first stone tool to this sentence fits inside a rounding error of it. And here is the part of their result that was genuinely unexpected. They removed the 5 great mass extinctions from the analysis. The end of the dinosaur, the end of the Permian, all of it, taken out. The lag did not change. The small background extinctions, the ordinary ones nobody has a name for, also took about 10 million years to be made good. That was not what anyone's expected the record to say. It suggests the delay is not really about the size of the disaster. It looks like a property of how life rebuilds at any scale. Now, a lag in diversity is not a statement that nothing happens. Something very definitely happens, and there is one place on Earth where you can watch it happen almost frame by frame. It is a run of bluffs east of Colorado Springs called Corral Bluffs. In 2019, Tyler Lyson and his colleagues published a record from there, covering roughly the first million years after the asteroid, with enough fossils and enough dated rock to put a clock on the whole sequence. Walk it forward. Before the impact, the largest mammals on the landscape are about the size of a raccoon. Immediately after it, the largest are about the size of a rat. Everything above that line is simply gone. 100,000 years pass. Raccoon-sized animals are back. 300,000 years pass. The biggest are the size of a large beaver. 700,000 years pass, and there is a heavy-bodied plant eater called Ectoconus on the landscape at over 100 pounds, with no living equivalent. From rat to that is roughly a 100-fold increase in body mass. 700,000 years to get one animal back up to the size of a large dog. And the animals are only half of that record. The plants move in step with them. The first forests after the impact are ferns and palms, low and thin and monotonous. Then walnut appears in the record. Then later, the legumes, the pea family, which fix nitrogen and are far richer food than anything available before them. Each time the plants take a step up, the animals take one shortly afterwards. The size of the biggest mammal on that landscape is not really a fact about mammals at all. It is a fact about what there was to eat, which is the quiet lesson of the whole site. Recovery is not one lineage seizing an opportunity. It is a whole system slowly relearning how to feed itself, one layer at a time, and nothing in it can move faster than the layer beneath it. You could stand on that landscape for 100 human lifetimes, generation after generation, and see nothing you would describe as a recovery. Nothing dramatic happens. The animals are slightly larger than your great-grandparents remembered. That is the whole event. seen from inside it. And through every one of those 700,000 years, the bone under the city has not moved. It is sealed, it is airless, and it is not participating. The living world is doing the slow work of refilling itself, and the most abundant vertebrate skeleton of the human age is simply lying there, intact, waiting for whatever finishes the climb. So the first question can be closed. The event picks who survives. The clock picks who wins. And the clock is the part that almost nobody's intuition includes. Which leaves the obvious one. Who is standing at the bottom of that staircase? Ask the question in public, and one answer comes back more than any other: rats. It deserves to be taken seriously because it is not a joke answer. Run the rat against the trait list from ordinary times and it scores almost perfectly. Small, eats anything, including a great deal that is not food. Breeds at a rate that makes population control a permanent job rather than a task. And its geographic range is effectively the entire planet, because it has spent 2,000 years traveling inside our ships, our carts, and our cargo containers. There is something else, and it matters more than the biology. The animal is already living inside the structure we would leave behind. Sewers, foundations, voids under floors, the warm cavities of a city. If we go tonight, it does not have to migrate into the ruins. It is already in them. In 2014, Jan Zalasevic, a geologist at Leicester, made this case publicly and made it specific. He argued that rats are the mammal best placed to refill the ecological space we are currently emptying. He pointed at islands, where rats have already been introduced and already cut off from one another, and called them a laboratory of future evolution. And he suggested that given time and empty niches, the animal gets large. The mechanism he is pointing at has a name: adaptive radiation. A single widespread lineage finds itself in a world with the competition removed and its populations, cut off from one another, drift into the empty roles separately. One island population ends up digging. Another ends up climbing. Another gets slower, heavier, and less afraid, because on an island with nothing hunting it, there is no longer any reason to be quick. Give that a few million years across a few thousand islands and coastlines, and the word rat stops describing one animal. That is conjecture, and he said so. But it is conjecture with a fossil standing behind it. About 2.5 million years ago, in what is now Uruguay, there was a rodent called Josephoartigasia manesi. Its skull alone is 53 centimeters long. Body mass estimates run to about a ton, and some reconstructions put it higher. That is a rodent the size of a small car. The strange detail is in the jaw. Bite force at the front teeth was around 1,400 newtons, which puts it in the range of a large carnivore, and the skull was built to take stresses well beyond anything its own bite could generate. Whatever the animal was doing with its face, it was doing something more violent than chewing. Digging, probably, cracking things open. Possibly fighting. Now compare the ceiling today. The largest living rodent is the capybara, an unhurried and largely inoffensive animal that tops out around 80 kilograms. 80 kilograms against a ton. The gap between those two numbers is the entire rat argument. It is not a claim about what rodents are. It is a claim about what rodents have already been, once, when the space was available. Now the disagreement, and it is worth sitting with, because two defensible numbers point in different directions. Zalasevich put the takeover at not before about 3 million years from now. The lag statistic from Kirshner and Weil says the world does not look refilled for about 10. Both hold up because they are not measuring the same thing. One asks when a lineage could plausibly radiate into empty niches. The other asks when global diversity is restored. The honest position is that the first number is a floor, the second is a ceiling, and the truth sits somewhere inside a 7 million year window that nobody can currently narrow. But notice what the rat casus does not claim. It does not claim a successor. Rodents have had roughly 50 million years of opportunity. They are the most species-rich order of mammals on the planet. They have been enormous before. And in all that time, they have never built anything, never taught anything across more than a couple of generations, and never left a single artifact. Inheriting the ground is not the same as replacing us. So set the mammals down for a moment and try the group that has already won on the one measure where winning is unambiguous. What if the successor is already here and has been for 100 million years and simply does not look like one? In 2022, Patrick Schultheis, Sabine, Newton and their colleagues pulled together 489 separate field studies of ant abundance from every continent and every major biome and produced the first properly grounded global estimate. 20 quadrillion, a 2 followed by 16 zeros. That is how many ants are alive at any given moment. 2.5 million ants for every living person. Their total mass comes to about 12 megatons of dry carbon, and that figure is larger than the combined mass of every wild bird and every wild mammal on this planet added together. Every eagle, every sparrow, every whale, every wolf, every bat. Put them all on one side, the ants outweigh them. And they are not merely abundant. Look at what the group already does. Some farm. Leafcutters cut vegetation they cannot digest, carry it underground, and use it to grow a fungus, which is the thing they actually eat. They have been running that agriculture for tens of millions of years, which is a considerably longer record than ours. Some keep livestock. They herd aphids, defend them from predators, move them to better feeding, and milk them. Some wage organized war with scouts, with columns, and with captives taken and raised as workers. And they build. Some nests are climate-controlled and ventilated, with waste chambers, nurseries, and separate galleries held at separate temperatures. Agriculture, livestock, warfare, architecture, and sanitation, all of it in place long before anything resembling us existed, and all of it evolved without one individual anywhere in the system understanding any of it. There is also the track record, which is better than anyone else's in this episode. Ants were already established well before the asteroid. They went through the end of the Cretaceous. They went through the warming 56 million years ago that shrank the horses. They went through the ice ages, and they came out of all of it more diverse than they went in. Nothing else on the candidate list can say that. The rat is a newcomer. The crow is a newcomer. We are barely a rumor. And they solve the problem that defeats the octopus. A colony does not die when an individual does. The queen is replaced. The workers are replaced continuously, and the structure carries on holding its shape through a complete turnover of everything inside it. Which is a genuine kind of immortality, and it is the reason they have lasted. Now the correction, because this is a case where the science publicly changed its mind and the old number is still in circulation. You have probably heard that the ants of the world weigh as much as all the humans. That came from earlier estimates, putting ant biomass somewhere between 70 and 100 megatons of carbon. The 2022 work put it at 12. The old figure was too high by a factor of 5 to 8. It was not a foolish error. It came from extrapolating a small number of local samples across an entire planet, and local ant densities vary enormously between habitats. The new estimate rests on hundreds of standardized studies rather than a handful. Measured against human biomass, ants come in at around a fifth, which is still an extraordinary number for an insect. It is simply not the number people repeat. And here is where the ants meet the bone. 20 quadrillion animals, 12 megatons. Total ecological dominance by any measure of number or of mass. And when a geologist opens the layer of this century, the ants are barely in it, and the chicken is everywhere. Abundance is not inheritance. It is not even preservation. But the failure that actually decides the case is deeper than the rock. No individual ant carries the plan. The colony is extraordinary, and the colony learns nothing it can hand to another colony. A leafcutter nest cannot teach a neighboring nest a better way to farm. Nothing accumulates in a form that can be copied, improved, and passed on. So the question was never numbers, it is minds. If anything is going to replace us in the sense people actually mean, it needs three things. A brain that can hold a plan, hands or something that works like them, and a way of handing what it learns to the generation that follows. Two candidates alive today have the first two. Only one lineage in the history of this planet has ever had all three. Start in the air. For most of the 20th century, the small size of a bird's brain was treated as a straightforward limit. In 2016, Surina Olkovich and her colleagues took 28 species apart and counted the cells. The brains of parrots and songbirds contain on average about twice as many neurons as a mammal brain of the same mass. They are packed far more densely. And in corvids and parrots, a much larger share of those neurons sits in the forebrain, which is the part doing the work we care about. The consequence is that a large parrot or a raven can carry as many forebrain neurons as a primate, with a brain several times the size. That is not a fond metaphor about clever birds. It is a cell count, and the behavior matches it. Crows make tools, modify them, and keep them. They recognize individual human faces and hold the grudge for years. They cache food in hundreds of places and remember where. In some populations, they appear to pass local techniques between individuals, which is the beginning of the thing that matters most. They are also already urban. If we vanish tonight, the crow does not need to adapt to the ruins. Like the rat, it is living in them. So why is the answer not simply crows? Flight. Everything about a flying animal is a negotiation with weight, and a brain is expensive tissue that runs constantly whether it is being used or not. A bird pays for every gram it carries, on every flight, for its whole life. That puts a hard ceiling on how much brain a flying body can afford, and a second ceiling on how large that body can get. Then there is the question of what a bird can actually do to the world. A beak and 2 feet can manipulate a twig with real precision. They cannot hold something still and work on it with both hands. Now go into the water, where the strangest candidate is waiting. An octopus has around 500 million neurons, which puts it far beyond any other invertebrate and into the range of small mammals. But the distribution is where it gets genuinely odd. Roughly 300 million of those neurons are not in the brain at all. They are in the arms. The animal does most of its thinking below the elbow. Each arm can work a local problem on its own, feel its way into a gap and decide what to do about it, with the central brain issuing something closer to intent than to instruction. It has 8 manipulators, skin that changes color in ways its own eyes cannot see, and problem-solving good enough that laboratories have to design tanks specifically to keep it inside them. And it is doing well right now. In 2016, Zoa Doubleday and her colleagues compiled 6 decades of catch data from 1953 to 2013 across 35 species and genera in 6 families. Octopus, squid, and cuttlefish numbers have been rising for 60 years in oceans where a great many other things have been falling. Manipulative limbs, a genuine nervous system, rising populations, and a sea steadily being emptied of its large predators and its large fish. On paper, it is the strongest case in this entire episode. And it fails on a single fact. The octopus is semelparous. It breeds once and then it dies. The male dies not long after mating. The female finds somewhere to lay, guards the eggs, and stops eating while she does it. She enters a decline that is not a side effect, but a program, and by the time the eggs hatch, she is dead. A common octopus lives 1 to 2 years. The giant Pacific gets 3 to 5. So every octopus that has ever lived has worked everything out from scratch. There is no parent in the water. There is nobody to watch, nobody to copy, nobody to correct a mistake. Whatever an individual learns in its 2 years, however clever, dies with it. The next generation starts at 0. So does the one after that. And it has been that way for a very long time. Which is the thing people leave out when they ask who replaces us. It was never mainly about brain size. Human beings are not remarkable because of what one of us can work out alone, which is not very much at all. We are remarkable because we almost never have to. Nearly everything you know, somebody handed to you. Two lineages alive today have the hardware. Neither of them has the inheritance. Set the candidates down for a moment, because there is another way to ask this question, and it is the way a geologist would ask it. Stop guessing who will be here. Ask what will be in the layer. Rock is not interested in potential. It records mass, abundance, and burial, and nothing else. On those three measures, the deposit forming under our feet right now has a very clear headline. Take that biomass arithmetic again and read it as sediment rather than as ecology. For every kilogram of wild mammal alive, roughly 14 kilograms of livestock. Cattle and pigs dominate the total. Wild mammals are a rounding error inside their own class. A future geologist cutting this layer does not find a wilderness that happened to have farms in it. They find a farm, with some wilderness surviving around the edges. And the burial environment is itself something new. For most of the history of this planet, a dead land animal had a very poor chance of becoming anything. It was eaten, or it weathered, or it was scattered, and the few that made it into the record did so by falling into a lake, a bog, or a riverbed at exactly the right moment. We have removed the luck. We now dig deep pits, place bone into them in enormous quantity, seal the pit with clay and plastic, and exclude the oxygen deliberately. Nothing in the history of the Earth has ever industrialized fossilization before. Whatever else this century is doing, it is manufacturing a fossil record on purpose, without ever intending to. And then there is the bone. Go back to it, because it turns out to be a document rather than an object. Bone chemistry records diet. Plants split into two broad photosynthetic groups, and they leave different carbon signatures in the tissue of whatever eats them. Maize sits in one of those groups. Modern chicken bone carries a maize signal that its ancestors do not, and that signal appears from the 1950s onward, when industrial feed took over. So the bone is not simply a bone. Written into its carbon is the moment a species stopped foraging and started being fed. It has a date inside it, which is worth pausing on because it tells you what actually survives about a civilization. In 2018, Gavin Schmidt and Adam Frank asked a deliberately strange question in a paper on what they called the Silurian hypothesis. If an industrial civilization had existed on this planet many millions of years before us, would we be able to tell? Their answer was uncomfortable. Direct artifacts would almost certainly not be found. Fossilization is rare. The exposed surface of the Earth at any one moment is small, and cities do not last. What would survive is indirect chemical anomalies, isotope excursions, odd sediments, traces in the layer rather than objects in it. They also pointed out that there has been enough fossil carbon in the ground since the Carboniferous, roughly 350 million years ago, to fuel a civilization like ours. Their point was not that one existed. They were explicit that it probably did not, and that the idea should not be believed merely because nothing else presents itself. The point was about detection. And that logic runs forward exactly as well as it runs backward. Whatever comes next, if anything does, is not going to find our cities. It is going to find a thin chemical horizon and a very large number of chicken bones. Which sets up the paradox this episode has been walking toward from the first sentence. The most abundant vertebrate in the fossil record of the human age is an animal that cannot survive its own body. Take a broiler chicken and simply allow it to live longer. Do not release it. Do not challenge it. Just leave it alone for another 4 weeks. Raising the age from 5 weeks to 9 produces a 7-fold increase in mortality. The growth rate that makes the animal what it is also kills it. Its skeleton develops multiple significant pathologies as a direct consequence of how fast that body is built. It is an animal engineered to be harvested before its own design catches up with it. So the species that will dominate the record of this age is not a survivor and was never a candidate. It is the clearest single signal in the rock, and it goes extinct within a season of us. Which leaves the seat. So, who moves into the seat we leave empty? Take the candidates in order, 1 pass each, and this time keep the verdicts together. The rat inherits the ground. That case is strong, and it is probably right about the ground. The animal has the traits, it has the range, and it has a fossil precedent standing at a ton. What it does not have is any record of building, and 50 million years in which it did not. The ants already own this planet by number and by mass, and they have owned it through every extinction since the dinosaurs. They will very likely still own it long after the question stops being asked. But nothing a colony knows can be handed to a colony that does not already know it. The crow and the parrot have the cells. That was the genuine surprise of the last 20 years, and it is a measurement rather than an opinion. What they do not have is a body that can afford a larger brain or hold a thing still with both hands. The octopus has very nearly everything and then dies before its children hatch. And the animal that will actually dominate the record is a bird that cannot live 9 weeks. Notice what the record has refused to give us here. It has not given us a name. It has given a list of traits, and then, through Monarez and his colleagues, it has told us the traits are not stable. In ordinary times, range decides. During the event itself, that association weakens in every group and vanishes in some, and body size stops pointing reliably in any direction at all. Which means the selection that matters happens under rules written by the event while it runs, and read only afterwards, by whatever is left to read them. And there is a harder problem hiding underneath that one, which is that the question itself may be badly formed. Every candidate in this episode was chosen for resembling us. Clever or numerous or handy or adaptable. That is not how the record works. Nothing that survived the asteroid had been selected for resembling what came before it. The winners of the last recovery were, at the time, unremarkable small animals with no obvious future, and the thing that made them the winners was invisible until the conditions changed. So the honest expectation is not a rat the size of a car or a crow with a workshop. It is something currently living in a way nobody has any reason to find interesting. And then the clock. About 10 million years between the loss and a world that looks full again. Not because the disaster is large, since the same lag turns up after small ones, but because that appears to be the speed at which life rebuilds. That is 50 times the age of our species. Whatever is going to be interesting has not started yet, and will not start for longer than our entire existence repeated 50 times over. Which brings it back to where it started. The bone is still there. Under the seal, in the dark, in the airless layer, holding its maze signal and its date. Around it, 22.7 billion of the same skeleton, laid down at 2,000 a second for as long as this goes on. Nothing is walking across it. The staircase from rat size to anything larger has not begun. The layer is simply accumulating quietly. And the animal inside it is the most successful vertebrate on Earth by every measure except the one that counts, which is whether it can exist without us. Perhaps something does eventually stand where we stood. Perhaps the seat was never a seat at all, and there is nothing to fill, only a space that closes over. The record cannot tell us which. It is not being coy. It genuinely does not contain the answer yet, because the answer has not been deposited. What it does contain is a bone the length of your finger, sealed under a city, waiting 10 million years for something curious enough to dig it up. And no guarantee whatsoever that anything will. Next time, we follow that same layer forward and ask what is left of our cities, our roads, and our machines after 100 million years. Thanks for watching. If this is the kind of question that stays with you, subscribe to Mystery Origins, and we will go further down next time.